How's it going, YouTube? Come on, today with another video, and today, guys, what I bring to you is where to hand trap. Now, I feel like this format alone seems like a very tall order because there's so many different decks out there that are just matched together with the engines alongside a lot of other decks that we're really just trying to figure out, hey, where do I hand trap them? So I have a very long list today about, hey, this is exactly where you do these important interactions that can really make you win the game. And a lot of times that's really what it is. Hand traps are the thing that can really make or break the game that you're in. And that's one thing, especially when I got my top 8 over the weekend in Detroit, that these interactions came up more often than not. So I really do hope that you enjoyed this video because there's so many different bits of information out there that you can find, but I really like being able to put it together in one concise video that you can go back and reference, especially right before an event, because I'll have all the different decks in the description below with a timestamp right next to it too, so you can go right back and see the very specific interactions that you're looking for. If you haven't already gotten a mat over on Imperium Duelist, definitely go over there and check it out. Use code GGYGO10 for a little discount. Also, if you're not subscribed, definitely consider subscribing as well, because there's so many different bits of information out there, like I was saying, that on this channel, we really like to go through each and every one of them and explain them to the best of my ability to try to help everyone improve at the game at their own pace. So without further ado, let's hop right into our interactions today and how we're going to hand trap in this format. So the first thing that I want to point out here is going to be, if you're playing against the Magician Souls, DPE, Brave decks, it's always correct to just wait for Verte and don't hand trap the Magician Souls. It's one of those things where, like, if you hand trap the Magician Soul, then they're just going to make Verte, and then they're still going to have the draw to you anyways in the follow-up play with the Celestial. It's always correct just to let the Magician Souls go through. If they draw into, like, a hand trap, or if they draw into, like, their Fusion Destiny, that's, you know, it kind of is how the game is, but at the same time, it's still just correct to wait for the Verte. Because the DP is still, like, way more board presence to be dealing with, and especially because Magician Souls is still half of Verte at that point, right? And especially if they already have their Brave engine out and about, they still have the ability to go into the Verte. So definitely make sure that you're on top of hand trapping the Verte instead of the Soul. It's just correct at the end of the day. Yes, you can always go ahead and say, like, they can't get the draw. If you have, like, an Ash and an Imperm, then yeah, that's fair. But at the same time, I would always just be waiting for the Verte, because it's always just going to be the correct play. Moving forward off this, though, we have the ability to go ahead and bait a hand trap here, which is a really clean play if you open up Fusion Destiny. If you open Fusion Destiny and you have a way to make Verte, like your normal combo, still go ahead and make the Verte. You use Verte's effect by paying 2,000, and then you're able to bait a Valor, an Imperm, or a Gamma. So essentially, you're just paying 2,000 life to activate the Forceful Sentry, which is crazy. It's really nice because it's not like they're not going to hand trap your Verte. Like, they're going to do that. So it's a really good play here, especially if you're able to follow it up behind it with a Fusion Destiny. If they let it go through, then they let it go through, and then you can use your souls to go ahead and pitch like a Fusion Destiny instead. But most of the time, your Verte will just go ahead and eat the hand trap, and then you'll be able to go ahead and use your Fusion Destiny, which is even cooler because on the standby phase in the next turn, they can't just go standby phase, Imperm, your DPE, because they already just used that to try and stop your Anaconda. I really like this play a lot. It's been done on me a couple times. I've used it a couple times, and I feel like every single time this happens, you just go so plus because, again, they're already down another card out of their hand, so it's a really clean play. Into our first deck today, though, Branded Invoked. I feel like this deck is actually kind of terrifying. It's pretty good, especially if they have Alistair and Branded Fusion. I feel like this one's always correct just to go ahead and negate the Alistair, because if you ever allow them to get the Macabre on board, your hand trap is really irrelevant at that point because they're going to be able to negate whatever you're trying to do, especially your Ash on like a Branded Fusion. So I always go ahead and hand trap the Alistair just to go ahead and get the extra body off the board. I don't really want to see a Macabre because at that point it's already another big thing that I have to swing over, right? So that's already going to be putting them on, you have to have Invocation. But what's cool about that, though, is in the branded form of the deck, they're almost never linking off the Alistair. So if you go ahead and Imperm the Alistair, they're not able to link it off if they do have Branded Fusion. So that way you're actually just shutting down completely their ability to make the Macabre. Because if they do have the Invocation, they're going to have the light target on their own somehow sent to the graveyard as well to go ahead and banish it out. So that's one thing, too, that I think is really important to note, that it really does cut off a lot of lines of play for this build in particular if you go ahead and just stop the Alistair. Even if they're able to go Branded Fusion and then go into their Mirror Jade, that's essentially just a Mirror Jade that you have to deal with, and to be honest, that's not really the most daunting task. So I feel like that's always the safest play here. The other thing is that if they have Lubellion after they go Branded Fusion, and you have the Imperm for that, they didn't go like the Alistair play, always go ahead and Imperm the Lubellion Dragon to go ahead and stop the combo from going off. This deck, again, it's very hit or miss on how many times you'll play against it in an event, but it is seeing a lot more play as of late. But it's always correct, like I said, to just go ahead and stop the Alistair before anything. If they open Branded Fusion, then yes, of course, you'll go ahead and Ash that, but that usually means they don't have Alistair, because at that point, they would have normal day Alistair first to make sure the Branded Fusion goes off. The next thing here is just pure branded. I think this is really important to talk about because we've been seeing it so much, right? And it just won the YCS in Colombia. And I really think that there's so many different interactions in this deck that I've been getting asked about specifically because this deck has so many different ways that it can play around hand traps. So the number one thing you have to know, especially about this branded in red here, is that if you crow the material that they're targeting in the graveyard, it will make the branded in red resolve without effect because it needs to do A then B. So if you get rid of the monster that they're trying to go ahead and bring back to their hand, this card will not resolve. The other thing too is that you can just negate it with Bell because it does attempt to add back to your hand. Always ashing the Branded Fusion, and then always imperming on the Albion or the Lubellion. Don't do it on a Luber, because I don't want to see you get punished by a quick Comedy. A lot of people are playing Comedy right now, so make sure that if you are going to hand trap something, it's not a Despia monster, because you'll just see them go ahead and dodge it. The other thing, too, is that if you have an Imperm, and you're going to Imperm a monster, if they have a Despia in their graveyard, you kind of have to gauge if that's a good Imperm target there, because at that point, what they could do is if they have the Despia in the graveyard, they could activate Branded in red and dodge your hand trap. Or if Comedy's in the graveyard and go to Imperm like an Albion or Lubellion, they can go ahead and tribute their Albion or Lubellion with Comedy and then dodge Imperm that way as well. So sometimes it's even better just to wait till your turn to go ahead and Imperm the Mirror Jade so that it has no effect at that point. Or they'll go ahead and banish itself or a monster that's on their field, which is a nice way to be able to get rid of that or force the activation out of it as well. Another thing that's really important to note too is that when they use Mirror Jade effect and they send Albion to the graveyard, because in the end phase the Albion activates like Titaniclad and it'll allow them to go ahead and set a branded spell or a trap from their deck, you can go ahead and crow this out of their graveyard or Shark Cannon it. And then they will not be able to set anything because again this activates in the end phase. It's not like Scarm that it just activates when it goes to grave, so you do have a window to go ahead and remove it before the activation will resolve in this card. The next thing here is going to be Tri-Brigade. So there's two different ways to do it in Tri-Brigade. One, you have to determine which build that they're on. Are they on the branded build? Are they on the DPE build? Are they playing Mercurier? So Mercurier is really cool because if your opponent, or if you have a fusion that labels on it Fallen of Albaz, so any single fusion that has Fallen of Albaz as material, then you can go ahead and use the Mercurier from your hand and negate the effect of any monster effect anywhere. Which is pretty nice to have, but the DPE build, again, has a lot more grind game to it. But either or, you still have a lot of very efficient ways to go ahead and hand trap this by belling their evil, by Imperm Valoring on the first summon that they have, and when they go ahead and banish 2, or you can go ahead and hit the Anaconda. The other thing is going to be going ahead and hitting the Fractal with Ash as well. Always very impactful here. The Anaconda is either going to be sending out the Branded Fusion, or it's going to be dumping the Fusion Destiny. Again, there's two different builds of this deck, so you kind of have to figure out on the fly which deck you're playing against. But either or, the interactions stay relatively close. Especially the bell on the Revel, always so important. Or you can go ahead and bell the effect of the DP in the graveyard as well, also very strong. So without further ado, let's go into our next deck here, Dinomorphia. So this is a deck that we're going to be seeing very, very soon. And a lot of people were talking about this being like one of the craziest decks that we're going to get because of this guy right here. This is Rexstrom. Rexstrom is essentially just a skill drain on the board, which is pretty crazy, but there are ways to deal with it. Rexstrom has an effect to go ahead and make the attack points of monsters on the field be equivalent to the life points. So whenever they go ahead and use that effect, this is a really good time to hold your Ghost Ogre for, because you can go ahead and remove the monster unless they have any kind of protection effects ready to go. Ghost Ogre is a really nice one here to go ahead and get rid of this monster before it's a problem. The other one is going to be Effect Veiler or Imperm on the Theresia. Going ahead and getting the set of any of their trap cards, really not ideal for you, so go ahead and Imperm this when you can. The other thing is that you can actually Ash Blossom the Frenzy and the Domain, which is really nice because they use cards from the deck. So this is another way to make sure that they're not able to fusion summon. So this is another one of those things where, like, if you have Small World in your deck and you're trying to figure out what to use or what to search to go ahead and stop the deck, usually searching Ash is a very surefire way to make sure that you're actually going to win very quickly. Because these cards are pretty broken, but once it gets ashed, they're already pretty low in life points. So really, really good card. The next thing here is going to be Eldlich. Eldlich has so many different variants right now. You have the branded variant, you have Cyberse, you have Pure. So it kind of depends on which one you're playing against. If you're playing against Pure, then you're going to go ahead and Imperm or Veiler the Juggernaut. If you're going against the branded build, you'll go ahead and Imperm or Veiler the Albion. Also, if you have Bell against any of these matchups, you can go ahead and Bell the effect of Albion on the field. You can go ahead and Bell the Sanguine Haquero. You can also go ahead and Ash the Scarlet or the Branded Fusion as well. But not only these, against the Cyberse build, you can go ahead and Veiler or Imperm the Anaconda. You can also Bell the effect to Reborn on the Dotscaper and the Firewall Guardian, which will come in handy very much so because they need the two monsters to come back to the board to go ahead and make their Dagda and extend. So that's where you really want to make sure that if you do have the Bell, it's going to be very quickly into a win for you. Hopefully, because these two cards are very important for them to be able to get back on the board and then extend further. That Bell is a really detrimental hand trap against them. The next one up here, we have Swordsoul. Token Collector is kind of like one of those GGYGO cards, you know, so insane against any kind of Swordsoul base deck. Very, very happy with that card. Every single time that I see it against Swordsoul, I feel like it's an auto win. Very, very strong though. The other thing though is if they are going for the Despot combo, which most of them are, go ahead and Bell the Despot out of their graveyard. The other thing too is that if you ever have the ability to go ahead and Ash the Hulk, the other thing is that you can go ahead and Imperm or Veiler the Hulk or the Chixiao, depending on the line that they're going, because the Chixiao either adds them into their Long Wand or adds them into their Blackout, so you want to make sure that you're going ahead and stopping one of those. But the Hulk play is always really nice to stop as well. But stopping the ability for them to make like their Chang'e as well, or a Baron, is always very important too. Even like the Blackout alone too seems very strong at times, that I've seen certain people just lose to that as well. So whether or not you want to go ahead and Imperm this or that, using Imperm on the Chixiao also really allows you to not be able to get hit with Circle, because a lot of times they won't use Circle on their own Chixiao. They'll use it on like a Tenyi or like a Moyi, but they usually won't get rid of their Synchro. So something to keep in the back of your mind. But there's also like the base build too, which is pretty similar. You can go ahead and Bell the Despot again. Token Collector is really good. You're hitting the Hulk, but the only other thing that changes is that you're actually going to go ahead here and use Ghost Ogre on the Fateful Adventure. Always a very insane play to do. Every single time I Ogre a Fateful Adventure, especially against a deck like this that needs the 7, it feels very impactful. The other thing is that you can wait for the Ash and just Ash the effect to go ahead and add Griffin. Don't Ash the Enchantress because everyone's on Gamma right now, and I feel like you're going to get punished mega hard for doing that. It happened to a couple people over the weekend, and I just had the Gamma every time. So that's one thing where it's not always that good, whereas if you would stop just to search for the Griffin, it would be a lot more impactful. Brave Tenyi, this is another deck that is close to Swordsoul. You want to go ahead and Ash the Yazi effect or the Vessel effect. Both very, very strong. Again, these two never really change in any of these matchups because everyone's on the Despot. You always just want to build that, and then Token Collector is always just goated, right? The only really big thing that changes in this is that during the combo, they're going to summon Tenyi, and then Tenyi is going to go ahead and allow them to go into an 8, dump Mo Yi, and then go ahead, we're going to be able to bring back the Mo Yi with the Boxia. Then you want to go ahead and Imperm or Veiler the Tenyi just to make sure that your opponent is not able to extend further, and then their end board becomes very lackluster. You can always Ash the Hulk as well, but like hitting the Yazi or hitting the Vessel is equally very, very strong as well. Dragon Link. Now, Dragon Link is very nice here, as for just very clean spots to hand trap. Again, against the Adventurer build, hit the Fateful Adventure. I did that over the weekend. Very impactful. Also, the boot sector, the Ogre on that's very strong. You can go ahead and bell the effect of the Zombie Vampire, and then literally anything you got to stop the Chaotic Ruler. This card is so broken. Go ahead and stop this at all means necessary. So, Valor, Imperm, Ash, whatever you have, go ahead and stop this card. Even Mourner works too. The next up here that we have is D2D. So D2D is really nice because this is a deck that we see here and there, but a lot of people still are pretty confused on where to hand trap this one. If they have Vice Typhoon, Necro Slime, or Dark Contract with the Swamp King, definitely go ahead and feel free to bell that. Then you are going to Imperm or Valor the Gilgamesh, and then Ash or go ahead and Ghost Ogre the Gate. If you have Ogre on Gate, it's really strong because you get rid of a Dark Contract on their board, so it makes their Machinex really weak because it needs to have a Dark Contract on board to be able to blow up. So this is something to kind of just think about whenever you're going into these matchups, and I do hope that videos like this really do help you because there's so many different decks out there, and I try to keep it really concise and to the point here where the video is not going to be like an hour long, but you're still going to be able to come back and see the very specific interactions that you can do on a lot of these different decks, because I really feel like that goes a long way, especially with seeing it over and over to the point where you can be like, oh, this deck, I know where to hand trap this deck, and it always makes you feel a lot more confident too, because you're like, I know how to beat this deck, instead of being like, I have no idea how to beat this deck, you know, I don't know where to hand trap it, I don't know what it's doing. So I do hope that this video really does give you, again, that confidence to really be able to go out to events and feel like you know a little bit more than the next guy, you know? So again, if you want a coaching session over Metafy, definitely go ahead and check me out on the page. It's down in the description below. If you want to join my Discord, Twitch, Twitter, definitely go ahead and follow on those. And I'll catch you guys all in the next video. Thank you all so much.